all the people of the South are in favor of segregation. And Supreme Court or no Supreme Court, we are going to maintain segregated schools down in Dixie.
It wasn't funny then, it's still not funny. But suddenly we have the 14th Amendment that took 100 years, brought on by the Civil War, suddenly must be complied with. Equal treatment under the law. And that was the resistance. They are not going to get equal treatment. What do you mean? Go to school with my little darling? And that is why resistance.
In the late 1950s, the battle for civil rights was fought in the classrooms of the South. The Supreme Court had ruled in a case called Brown versus Board of Education that segregated schools were unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment. Many Southerners saw the decision as an attack on their heritage and traditions. The battle lines were drawn.
I think we were not really quite prepared for the extent to which the South would resist the implementation of the Brown decision. In fact, the shutting down of the NAACP in Alabama, the resistance evidenced in places like Virginia and Arkansas, the legislative investigations committees in Florida and in other states, really frightened us.
And the white resistance could also be violent. In February 1956, a black woman named Autherine Lucy was quietly admitted to the all-white University of Alabama. But the night after she arrived, students and townspeople began a riot. The university suspended Lucy temporarily, it said, for her own protection. And Autherine Lucy sued, claiming that mob rule was being allowed to overturn the law.
Charge has been made, and made by some fairly moderate people, gradualists you might call them, that the NAACP, with General Counsel you are, is moving too far, too fast. That following the decision of the Supreme Court, you would have been well advised to let things move along gradually for a while, that you can't overthrow the prejudices of 300 years overnight.
You can't, or maybe you can't, override prejudice overnight. But the Emancipation Proclamation was issued in 1863, 90-odd years ago. I believe in gradualism. I also believe that 90-odd years is pretty gradual.
Autherine Lucy won her case, but the Board of Trustees expelled her anyway for saying the university had used the riots to keep her out. Across the South, the Lucy case gave resisting whites hope. If they were willing to use violence to fight the law, it seemed they could keep black children in black schools. And it seemed the federal government would not step in. After the riots, the president spoke only of extremists on both sides. He worried, like much of the country, about moving too fast on school integration.
I personally believe if you try to go too far, too fast in laws in this delicate field that has involved the emotions of so many millions of Americans, you're making a mistake. I believe we've got to have laws that go along with education and understanding. And I believe if you go beyond that at any one time, you cause trouble rather than benefit.
It was over a year before the black community would find its chance to fight back. Here in Little Rock, Arkansas, 1957. Little Rock was a moderate southern city in a moderate southern state. By 1956, both the state universities and the city buses were integrated. Its school board made plans to desegregate slowly. The first year, 1957, 9 black teenagers would attend one school, Central High. Little Rock's black leaders were hopeful.
We have a very enlightened group of people in Arkansas. And they have accepted everything else. They accepted bus integration without any fanfare. And they are they will take the school integration as just another going to school.
The black children were not getting a chance, and they needed it. They needed it as more than anyone, and we were very strongly in favor of that and could see that integration would improve that. But we did, at that stage, have fears, and they were, I guess, just natural, inborn, emotional fears. And so we needed some help from the officials, the state officials, the county, the city officials, and primarily from Governor Faubus as to what he told the people, whether it was the law or not.
One of the reasons is
Governor Orville Faubus of Arkansas was a moderate by Southern standards, a man the black community had supported. But in his last election, he'd faced tough opponents, and he knew he'd need the segregationist vote if he wanted to be reelected. The night before school opened, Faubus made a decision.
I have therefore, in accordance with the solemn responsibilities and the oath of my office, taken the following action. Units of the National Guard have been and are now being mobilized with the mission to maintain or restore the peace and good order of this community. Advanced units are already on duty on the grounds of Central High School.
The Arkansas National Guard ringed the school with orders to admit only the white students. It shocked the country. State troops were now being used to prevent enforcement of federal law. At the center of the crisis were these 9 teenagers, selected by the school board because of their excellent grades. The first day, 8 of the 9 went to school together, accompanied by their parents and ministers. They expected some harassment, but no real trouble.
You could cut it with a knife, the tension outside the school with these people who had come in from other parts of the state, other states. There were license plates from all other states that were there, people who had come in and were outside our school.
The 8 children and the adults with them were turned away by the National Guard. The black parents and the NAACP went back to court. The leader of the state organization, Daisy Bates, became the students' strongest supporter. The national NAACP saw this case as a showdown for desegregation, and they assisted the local lawyers.
Well, we consider this case important as one of the segregation cases, but in addition to the fact that this one involves the appearance of the National Guard on the scene, and for the first time in any of our cases, it's the action of the governor that eventually will have to be brought into court.
Then you'd see it as a state-federal conflict of authority?
Oh, I don't think there's any question about that.
The question was whether the federal government would assert its authority. The pressure on the president increased. Defiance of federal law seemed to be spreading. From Little Rock, here to North Little Rock, to Nashville, Tennessee, and to Charlotte, North Carolina.
Get the microphone in there.
Some people blamed Eisenhower for this resistance, saying his lack of leadership on civil rights encouraged the extremists.
President Eisenhower's position was that he was the president of all the people. He felt that his role was to talk to the moderates throughout the country, including the southern states. He felt that, and was told by many advisors, that Governor Faubus could be reasoned with, and that an amicable solution could be found in the Little Rock crisis.
In mid-September, the president and the governor had a meeting at Eisenhower's vacation home in Newport, Rhode Island.
The president thought that he had persuaded Governor Faubus to go back and allow the black children to enter the high school peaceably. It was quite a surprise to him. He felt let down when Governor Faubus decided against allowing the black children to enter the high school.
Eisenhower had convinced Faubus that ultimately the state could not resist federal authority. Faubus changed his tactic. He simply removed the National Guard, leaving only city police, in an explosive situation as the Little Rock Nine entered Central High School.
We entered the side of the building, thousands of people out front. And we were entering the side, and I could just get a glimpse of this group. And on the car, I could hear, on the car radio, I could hear that there was a mob. And I knew what a mob meant. And I knew that the sounds that came from the crowd were very angry. So we entered the side of the building very, very fast.
We've just got a report here on this end that the students are in. Try turn the camera down that way, Don, down there. You can see from here some of the action occurring down there.
Finally, President Eisenhower realized he had to act, and he did quickly. That night, he sent in the paratroopers of the 101st Airborne Division.
An extreme situation has been created in Little Rock. This challenge must be met, and with such measures as will preserve to the people as a whole their lawfully protected rights. If resistance to the federal court order ceases at once, the further presence of federal troops will be unnecessary, and a blot upon the fair name and high honor of our nation in the world will be removed. Mob rule can not be allowed to override the decisions of our courts.
My fellow citizens, we are now an occupied territory. In the name of God, whom we all revere, in the name of liberty we hold so dear, in the name of decency which we all cherish, what is happening in America?
When we got into the Jeep, into the station wagon rather, and the convoy that went from Mrs. Bates' house to the school, it had a Jeep in front, a Jeep behind. They both had machine gun mounts. And then the whole school was ringed with paratroopers and helicopters hovering around. And we marched up the steps with this circle of soldiers with bayonets drawn. I figured that we had really gone into school that day. And walking up the steps that day was probably one of the biggest feelings I've ever had. I figured I had finally cracked it.
And there was a feeling of pride and hope that, yes, this is the United States. Yes, there is a reason I salute the flag. And it's going to be okay. You know, if these guys just go with us the first time, it's going to be okay. The troops did not, however, mean the end of harassment. It meant the declaration of war.
Tell your mama, tell your pa, I'm gonna send you back to Arkansas. Oh, yes, ma'am.
It was the beginning of a school year like no other at Little Rock Central High.
When we got in the school, they then assigned us an individual soldier to walk us from class to class. He waited outside the classroom, and every time the bell rang and classes changed, he would walk us. We'd have our own personal guide walking us to the next class.
The troops were wonderful. There was some fear that they were dating the girls in high school. And I don't care what they were doing. They were wonderful. But they couldn't be with us everywhere. They couldn't be with us, for example, in the ladies' bathroom. They couldn't be with in gym. You'd be walking out to the volleyball court, and someone would break a bottle and trip you on the bottle. I have scars on my right knee from that.